Hey friends, John Bush here, and I want to talk to you about mass formation psychosis, about the Matrix, and about spending a lot of energy trying to quote-unquote wake people up or red people versus going out and building a better world, which in my opinion, as I'll try to convey today, is the best thing that we can do to wake people up. As David Friedman said in Machinery of Freedom, he said, educating people through books, literature, videos, that's one way to educate people. But another way is to show people, right? Lead by example, so to speak. Anyway, I was inspired to do this video because I recently started listening to the Dr. Malone video on Joe Rogan, who's doing great work lately and is just such a cool non-biased kind of communicator of ideas, and his platform is something I'm really grateful for. And I also want to tie in the Matrix, right? Everybody's watching this new Matrix movie. Is it Matrix Resurrection? I don't know. We started watching it today, and it's just something that I haven't finished it. I don't know if we will finish it. It's kind of not that good. There's good parts, and the whole Matrix story and the allegory of the Matrix, which I believe is just so appropriate for the world that we're living in, then when it was released, and especially now, it just really got me thinking. So Joe Rogan recently had Dr. Peter McCullough. He's recently had Dr. Robert Malone, who was also on my good man Grant Cardone, who does the 10X stuff, success, business, wealth, real estate. He was mainly just a business guy, but I always knew in his podcasts and stuff, he would talk about the New World Order briefly, talked about the Las Vegas shooting, something being up there because he was at that hotel when it happened. I think it was Mandalay Bay. And of course, he's been speaking out against the COVID injections and shots. He had Robert Malone on his big YouTube channel, which has millions of subscribers, and it got deleted and censored. And that was something that really pushed him over the edge to start talking about what's going on more. Talked about Event 201. Anyway, I digress about Grant Cardone, but it all ties back in because so all this censorship and this cleansing and this memory holding of information, the reality that's being presented by the powers that wish they were, by the technocrats, by the oligarchs, by big pharma, by this cabal, by the deep state, some would call it, by the shadow government, is what we used to call it back in the conspiracy days. They're creating this cleansed reality that I liken to the Matrix, right? So there was this picture going around of a Google search. And as you know, when you put something in the Google search bar, there's suggested searches that pop up. And often these suggested searches are propaganda, and it's like cleansed information. So the picture had someone searching mass formation psychosis, and it was like calculating or needed more data in order to bring up those populated searches, And so the meme or the image was like Dr. Malone broke Google's little censorship thing. But it's Matrix world that people, when they go search things about COVID, about vaccines, about 9/11 truth, about the election or whatever, they get this cleansed Matrix version. And it got me thinking too that, the food that people eat, the medicine that they take, the money that they use, the government is all, it's all fake. It's a fake world. And so let me tie it all back, right? So this mass formation psychosis concept, I'm not a psychologist or whatever, but, this is something that I've been talking about for a while, even before COVID. It's like this cognitive dissonance that occurs, and this people are made to be afraid, they're made to be anxious, and that makes them even easier to control compared to the strong person that's confident in their own, and they trust themselves. They're capable of thinking for themselves, right? Makes it easier for them to control. We've seen this. The big event that caused me to quote unquote wake up was 9/11. In fact, shortly after 9/11, I feel blessed to have a mind and a consciousness and a soul that was ready to be ready to take the red pill, to go back to the Matrix analogy. And this same phenomenon happened then, the mass formation psychosis. It was very clearly a sophisticated false flag terror attack, no matter who was responsible for it, even if it was a let it happen situation instead of made it happen, right? Everyone was made to be afraid, made to be uncertain, and then powerful leaders and the puppet string masters and the manipulators and the media, this New World Order, they came in and manipulated everyone, and there was a psychosis. Everyone thought the boogeyman was just hiding next door, right? And most definitely this phenomenon is taking place with COVID. So much fear, anxiety, fear of the other. We've reached a situation where it doesn't matter what information you present to people, they are still going to remain in their slumber. Because a lot of people, they love the Matrix. They love the comfort. There's this whole financial aspect of it too, with all this inflation and the income tax and the control. People are so tired and busy and behind that they don't have, Maslow's hierarchy of needs. They're so focused on their shelter and their food and sustenance for their family that they don't have time to sit back and contemplate what's going on in the world, to research conspiracy theories, And so, to bring it back to the red and the blue pill analogy, and to kind of impart my lesson, a lot of people, when given the choice of the red and the blue pill, are going to continue to pick the blue pill. And I see a lot of people in our community, truth, freedom, liberty, health, freedom community, they are trying to force the red pill down people's throats. And for one, I think it's kind of a waste of time. So let me tie in this other thing, right? So we're talking about Dr. Robert Malone, mass psychosis. We're talking about the Matrix. Let me bring in the book, let's bring in the Bible. It's the book of, what was it? The book of Job? Is it the book of Job? Pretty sure it's the book of Job. Anyway, it is the book of Job. There's this awesome essay by Albert J. Nock, who is a 20th century libertarian thinker. And it's all about the book of Job. Correct me if I'm wrong on that book of Job thing. So I don't want to say it for sure because I'm not certain. Isaiah's Job. Is it Isaiah's Job? The book of Isaiah. Isaiah's Job is the name of the essay. And so Isaiah, remember, this is, just think about red pill and blue pill. And a lot of people spend a significant amount of time trying to wake people up. Truthing, protests, posters. Protest has its place in showing, that there's strength in numbers and just saying no, right? Mass resistance. But more often than not, these protests that sometimes even turn into a revolution, they just want to get the leader out. They don't want to completely revamp the system altogether, right? But a lot of people spend time trying to wake people up, and the manner in which they do it, I'm going to talk about that too, isn't very successful. And a lot of people are ruining relationships and tarnishing relationships, right? So anyway, back to this book of Job. So, where's the book of Isaiah? Sorry, guys. Anyway, it's all about Isaiah and his relationship with the Lord. And he's given the task by the Lord of spreading the gospel. And he tries and he tries and he tries and he tries. And he's completely disheartened. And he comes back and he's like, God, I'm just feeling really frustrated here. Nobody wants to hear it. Nobody wants to listen. Everyone's just in their slumber. And I feel frustrated. I feel like giving up, right? And the Lord, his lesson is like, just put the message out there and the remnant will come to you. The remnant will hear the message. You don't have to go find them or seek them out. They will find you. Right? And the remnant, of course, are the people that are going to pick up the pieces when civilization and the apocalypse happens. The folks that stick around, it's the believers that rebuild society. So there's a lot of stuff to pull for us, our activist truth community, trying to create a better world with this, right? One thing I realized after the Ron Paul for President campaign in 2008, I think he got like 1 million votes or more. Right? Ron Paul's a libertarian candidate. He ran for a libertarian before. He was a Republican candidate, but he's a libertarian Republican. He was very consistent and pure on the philosophy of liberty. And he woke up and inspired an entire movement of people. And I realized, like, wow, this guy got so many votes. Now, mind you, many of those votes were just conservative Republicans or evangelicals that didn't really want to abolish the state. They just appreciated him. However, there's a lot of us that ended up becoming voluntarists. And it was a big eye-opener for me that there's so many people. And I started having the realization that maybe there's enough of us quote unquote awake, enough of us that believe in freedom and that value truth, that if we simply started working together and opting out, we could find the freedom that we all deserve, right? That was a lot of the inspiration for the Freedom Cell Network, this strength in numbers concept. And I still believe that's true even more so today, because I've had the honor of being around since the beginning of this modern liberty movement, and seeing the evolution of it into voluntarism and anarchism and into alternative institutions. In fact, I like to think I played a good role in shifting the messaging towards agorism, towards the creation of alternative institutions instead of the politics stuff. A lot of Libertarian Party people maybe need to hear that message. But I strongly believe that then and now, more than ever, there's enough of us to where if we shift our focus away from the problem, away from all the Illuminati research, trying to wake people up, trying to shove red pills down people's throats, definitely away from the politics, and towards organizing ourselves, exiting and building, or building the alternatives so we may exit, we could find liberty in our lifetimes. Maybe 10, 20, 30 years. We got to have a lot of people too. But a lot of people insist on trying to wake people up. Now let me talk a little bit about that and strategy behind that, and give my advice on how we ought to go about that. So there's a significant number of people in the world. Derek Bros shared this little thing for me. It was like some studies or analysis on how many people are willing to think outside the box, how many people already think outside the box, how many people are open to it, and then how many people are just far gone, you know? And it was like 70% of the people, or it's like 5% of the people get it and are active, and there's like 15% that know what's going on, but they're not actively changing anything. And then there's like 10 or 20% that's open for conversion. And then the rest of the folks are just like, they're just lost, blue-pilled, love the blue pill, like just all excited about Biden. And on the other hand, all excited about Donald Trump, or not even Donald Trump. They're like moderate Republicans that just want to go to the country club and go play golf or whatever. No offense about country clubs and golf, but a lot of people want to just be comfortable. So I think that there's enough of us that are working on building. If we are to spend time on waking people up or growing the ranks of the remnant, then we need to have this awareness, right? Some people don't want to hear it. Obviously, if someone initiates and asks questions and shows an open-mindedness towards the information that you're putting out, or they're the ones that initiate, yes, that's opportune. But many people, you can kind of tell that they're immediately putting up brick walls. They don't want to hear it in the least bit. And in fact, you can also sense, many people don't have the ability to sense this, but you ought to discern this, that you're tarnishing and harming the relationship. And so we need to have the awareness and the consciousness to turn it off, okay? We don't need to ram stuff down people's throats. We don't need to blast our whole family on Thanksgiving. We don't need to stand on the street corner shouting obscenities or acting as though we're better than everyone else, because at one point we were all blue-pilled, right? So if we are, there is merit in waking people up and growing the ranks, right? And so I want to just encourage people to spend less time on those that are not willing to have the blue pill at all, that are comfortable in their slumber, that the cognitive dissonance is too strong with them to even begin to challenge their core accepted beliefs, and learn to identify those people that at least are like, oh, they ask more questions. You say something, kind of radical and extreme, like we can exist without the state, or what if this is all part of an agenda, usher in this great reset control surveillance system? And they're like, no, I heard about the great reset, but, at the same time, I do see a lot of this biosurveillance stuff. It's kind of strange, the vaccine passport, right? Or you're talking to them, there's like all sorts of logical stuff. And you're like, well, if having antibodies is more effective than having the fake antibodies from the gene therapy, then why wouldn't the vaccine passport ask for people's antibody test, right? Something like that. And people are like, that is a good question. Then they might be ripe to hear, right? Then it's worth investing time, not tarnishing a relationship by trying to vomit all over somebody, word vomit all over somebody. And let me give you some advice on how to go about being more successful in this field, because there's a whole lot of, I've been doing this for 20 years, and in that time, I've spent a significant amount of time researching success for activism, for sales, for strategy, for organizing, for marketing, for advertising. And like I have this, like one of the things that I do is I apply all this success stuff, like Grant Cardone, for example, or Dale Carnegie, who I'm going to share about, or whatever, Tony Robbins, apply it to our work in the activist world. So I strongly encourage people to check out How to Win Friends and Influence People. And one of the things that he brings up, and this is a great way to wake people up to grow our ranks, he talks about speaking in terms of other people's interests. So if you know someone, or if you can pick up on the talking points, kind of where they're coming from, maybe there's some underlying principles behind what it is they're saying that they're concerned about. Like folks that are into natural health, and they're still buying all the BS about COVID and the vaccines. Maybe there's an opportunity there, like natural health. Okay, is this natural? Or people that are more left-leaning, anti-capitalist, and they're all pushing the vaccine. You're like, well, wait a second. This is a huge corporation that's having immense profits. See how that works? Or Christians, for example, that are very strongly Christian, that are very anti-abortion. He said, well, that they use aborted fetal tissue in order to culture some of the stuff that's in these vaccines. You speak in terms of their interests. Super effective. Nobody cares what you're into. Nobody cares what your values are. A lot of people care about themselves. So there's just certain ways that we can communicate with people. One of them, too, is like honor people's boundaries. And there's that movie, what's it called? It has Leonardo DiCaprio in prison in I don't know, the one where he goes in and like they implant dreams in people. They implant ideas in people's minds through their dreams. What's it called? I'm sure you'll share with me in the comments. Like, plant seeds for people and let them sprout on their own, because if someone comes about, has a realization or a revelation, and they believe that it came of their own beliefs, it was they're responsible for it, they're much more likely to believe it. They'll have a firmer foundation of trust in it if it came from internal, even if you're the one that plants the seed, rather than shoving it down their throats and putting yourself above them. Also, have compassion for people. I strongly encourage people to check in on mainstream media every once in a while. My lovely lady always listens to NPR in the car. I haven't checked in on it in a while, but I do check in on the news. I check out Drudge Report. It used to be a little cooler and more anti-establishment, and then COVID happened. They went anti-Trump. I'm not a Trump guy, but I appreciated a lot of what Trump had to say, and so kind of how he represented a departure from this DNC deep state thing. He's still a total authoritarian and pushing the vaccines for anyone that's still sipping all this Q Kool-Aid. Real quick, I wanted to mention earlier about the whole Robert Malone mass psychosis thing. I noticed that now Salon and all these other sources, Forbes wrote an article. It's very sophisticated. So the mass psychosis thing Robert Malone talked about in regards to folks that are buying into all the COVID stuff. But there's already articles coming out that are repositioning it. The Forbes article was like, he may have been right about this phenomenon taking place, but the way he described it happening is not what is really happening. Really, it's the conspiracy theorists that are engaged in the mass formation psychosis. And of course, he pointed to a lot of the Q stuff. I think Q is a sophisticated intelligence operation to discredit the movements that were forming around the pedophilia stuff and exposing this whole deep state thing. Anyway, so they're very sophisticated in their propaganda. It really is an information war, like Alex Jones calls it. Information springs up, they censor Robert Malone, the information gets out through Rogan, then they got to spend a bunch of time countering that, right? Joe Rogan is a vector for truth to reach the masses. Like when he talked about taking ivermectin, it's like all of a sudden they had to counter that. CNN, all this stuff going out, like it's very sophisticated, but the truth always will prevail. And just to tie it all together, to bring it home for you, it's getting dark and it's cold out here. We're on the precipice of a dramatic shift in society and in the world, in the culture, and the technology, and the governments, and the economics and systems. And I often get really frustrated. In fact, I've traced times when I've actually been around Derek Bros in person, and I watch him give a speech, And I'm there, you know, like me and Derek are colleagues, right? But I'm there watching him. I'm like, oh, wow. It's just the sense of, you know, not urgency per se, because I kind of lost that urgency thing and know that this is going to be a generational fight that we're involved in. So I see that we have time, right? That's me though. I do a lot of stuff in my activism. So if you don't do a lot of stuff, or if you're not prepared, or if you don't have the solar panels and the Tesla power walls on the side of your house, well, this is my garden here. So I still got a lot of freaking work to do when it comes to preparedness. We have it covered because it froze last night, but you should have a sense of urgency. I have a sense of urgency, but it's kind of tapered with restraint. But when he talks to me, he gets me all pumped up and fired up, and it's like, wow. And he really brings it home that this is real life shit that's taking place, because he has that perspective too, that longer term perspective, where he's been in the game for 10 years and he can see the momentum, more than 10. It's like, okay, we saw this coming, now it's being implemented here. Oh, it's uprooted here. There's a response, reaction, there's a movement. And it's like, now it's all driving home with COVID. The New World Order is being implemented at breakneck speed. And when I hear from Derek, and he talks about the 7 generations, and he talks about his nephews and nieces and his family and how he cares about them, it really gets me pumped up, and it makes me want to talk to my family more about it. Now, of course, as you can guess, my family's, I beat it over my dad's head for so long, and he's finally in on it, and like, he gets it, especially like the 9/11 truth stuff. It'll like come up and it'll be like, well, yeah, 6.5 seconds. How could that building collapse? It was hardly even damaged. But we're facing some crazy stuff. And if you care about this, if you see the truth, if you have that spark of freedom, of betterment, if you know we can do better, if you have family you're concerned about, it's really important that we take this work seriously, creating a better world. So to drive it home back to the Matrix, people, the life that they lived in the fake world, in the Matrix world, was comfortable, and there was beauty and technology and food and wonder. And then when people get pulled out of the Matrix, when they take the red pill and they go to the real human world, the true reality, it's this Zion city that's all dark and busted up. They call it Io in the second one. They actually have a sky, but they're still trying to get vegetables going, right? A fake digital sky. So here's my advice. Spend a little bit less time on the folks that are so deep in the psychosis. They're going to trust Dr. Tony Fauci and their medical doctor they've been seeing for 5, 10, 20 years more than you. And the sophisticated propaganda about misinformation has been highly effective. In the 9/11 truth days, I called it the kookification, right? They kookified people that bring up legitimate things. Q was even more sophisticated, and that's the thing. But we don't need the masses. We don't need a majority. We don't need the folks, the NPCs, non-playable characters, in order to create the world that we desire. Okay? So let us spend less time trying to red pill the folks that are so deep in the mass psychosis where it's hopeless and we're going to waste our time and damage a relationship potentially. Let's be able to discern who is open to being red pilled and focus on those folks when it comes to growing our rings. But as I contend, and I still contend, as I've contended in the past, I still contend even more so now that the Freedom Cell Network has over 30,000 people and we actually have a infrastructure to do this. The most valuable thing we can do with our time, our resources, our money, our energy is to create the better world, to create the alternative systems that are able to provide for our common wants and needs, to decouple ourselves from the state, from big tech, from the technocracy, from the allopathic big pharma control paradigm, and to build a better world. But here's the kicker, right? And here's how we can most effectively pull off those folks that are on the edges of the mass psychosis, that are open to exploring the possibilities. A lot of people, when you bring up anarchism, the idea of having a stateless society that's peaceful and works and orderly in some ways, more orderly, people say, well, that's never happened, right? Mind you, we live in pretty much anarchism a significant time of our lives, and almost all of our choices are from our own fruition, right? our own free will that we decide based on our values and our risk assessment and so on and so forth. But other people are like, well, I've never seen that work, right? Well, answer that I started giving when people say anarchism doesn't work is, well, check out Bitcoin, for example. Here we have a decentralized technology that has no central authority behind it. There's no board of directors, no regulatory agency, no corporation, no government behind it, and yet people are interacting with one another successfully. There's crime associated here and there, there's some fraud here and there, but for the large part, we have anarchism in action globally, a global network, a global institution that's decentralized, non-hierarchical, and stateless. It's an anarchy. It's an example of anarchy working, right? By the way, I'm hosting a webinar, January 6th, Build Wealth, Opt Out. I'm going to talk about cryptocurrency, decentralized technology, and how I believe it's a wonderful tool for helping us to build wealth, protect wealth, preserve wealth, grow wealth, and also opt out of this technocracy by creating alternative institutions. And so here's the kicker. Let us focus more of our time on creating a beautiful, sexy Zion. And to bring it back to David Friedman, Machinery of Freedom, let's educate people by showing them that peaceful coexistence not in a non-hierarchical way is possible, and it's actually pretty freaking cool, right? So let's attract people to be red-pilled, to unplug from the matrix, and show them that on the other end, they're not going to go to some compound like David Koresh. They're not going to be doing all sorts of crazy, edgy things. They're not going to be wearing black beanies and throwing Molotov cocktails. They'll be wearing this pretty green color beanie, and they'll be growing food, and they'll be building homesteads, and they'll be enjoying life, walking through their little pecan orchard with their solar paneled house. And they're going to be pulling their kids out of government school. The kids are going to be educated. The kids are going to be able to have a conversation with an adult. The kids are going to be peaceful in how they're raised. They're going to be healthy, happy. They're going to be, our Zion is going to be one where we rely on preventative, natural, Eastern medicine modalities, supplementation. We're not in a constant reactive paradigm with surgeries and chemical oil-based pharmaceuticals, right? We're growing our own food. We're not eating matrix fake plastic food that has chemicals all over. We're getting back to the source. We're getting back to the soil. We're eating healthily. We walk around with a vibrant look. We're able to keep more of our wealth because we've decoupled from those systems, and we have enough strength in numbers. We're able to abandon that tax paradigm altogether. We'll raise a whole new generation of people without social security numbers that never get inputted into the system. Therefore, it's never so hard to take them out of the system. They're never even a part of it. We don't do the compound, the scary thing. We don't go isolate ourselves in the woods to get away from the state or whatever. Instead, we build regenerative eco-communities that are self-sufficient. We don't run away from the technology like some people are saying, oh, it's all part of the Fourth Industrial Revolution, any type of technology, basically. We leverage the beautiful technology to connect us, to share information, to automate things that can be more easily done by freaking computer programs and robots, so we can focus on living the good life and improving ourselves. Like, I got visions for futuristic eco-cities that are so beautiful. And the idea is, because our Zion is so attractive, the people that are still living in the statist society with the crumbling infrastructure, working their asses off each and every day, sick on shit food, scared out of their minds because they watch so much damn TV propaganda, they're going to look over and be like, wow, what is it that those guys are smoking? I want me some of that shit. All right? So let's lead by example, guys. Let's create the better world. Let's focus more time and energy on people that actually want to hear the message and that are willing to be red-pilled. And let's live the good life. All right, John Bush, peace and freedom. I'm out.